Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Vibin Higher Podcast. As usual, I am your host, Trevor, and today I got into meditation and mindfulness with Dr. Arnie Kozak. Dr. Kozak is a psychotherapist, clinical assistant professor in psychiatry at the University of Vermont College of Medicine, and workshop leader at the Barre Center for Buddhist Studies, the Copper Beech Institute, and the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. He is the author of Wild Chickens and Petty Tyrants, 108 Metaphors for Mindfulness, the Everything Guide to the Introvert Edge, the Awakened Introvert, Practical Mindfulness Skills for your maximizing your strength and thriving in a loud and crazy world, the Everything Essentials Buddhism Book, and Mindfulness A-Z, 108 Insights for Awakening Now. Arnie has been practicing yoga and meditation for over 30 years and is dedicated to translating the Buddha's teachings into readily accessible forms. In the long winters of northern Vermont, when he's not working, he rides the frozen slopes on his snowboard. During the short summers, he golfs. During all seasons, you can find him trail running with his dogs in the foothills of the Green Mountains. Dr. Kozak is truly a brilliant man, so let's see if you guys are the same on the other side of this one. Dr. Kozak, well, first of all, thank you for joining us on the show today. Your reputation certainly precedes you. Like I've told you, you were definitely heavily requested when I asked about doing a show on meditation. So definitely thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us.
Yeah, you're welcome, Trevor. I'm glad to be here.
Definitely. Well, I think we should just kind of hop into it. So for somebody that might not be aware, what would you say the difference is between a meditation practice and a mindfulness practice?
Well, it's a good question, and mindfulness has a couple of meanings. So if we think of mindfulness as it can be a way of being. So it's a way of living our lives with a certain kind of awareness and attention and intention. Whereas mindfulness meditation would be a specific set of practices that can actually help to facilitate being mindful in all the other moments of our lives. So meditation would be more of a formal practice that helps to train us to be more awake and aware, and then we can be mindful in our lives. So it's possible you could have somebody who does meditation practice, but it doesn't spill over into their lives. That wouldn't be the result you want. You want to be able to take the meditation and use that to engage with your life in a way that is what we would call mindful.
Okay, so in a sense, meditation is sort of the practice for reaching this maybe state of mindfulness?
Well, we could think about mindfulness as a state. We could think about it as a state that we go into and out of all the time. We could also think about mindfulness as a more enduring way of being, almost like a personality trait, and that with practice that we can have that more available to us. So it's a little more than a state. And there are different ways of understanding mindfulness. I think that sometimes I talk about mindfulness with a small m and mindfulness with a capital M. Mm-hmm. But, the meditation, typically I view it as a means towards being more mindful, not just meditating in and of itself.
So we can definitely see the difference here between mindfulness and meditation, right? So that it wouldn't be the same thing.
Well, there are certainly the qualities that we experience when we're meditating are the very same ones that we want to be experiencing while we're out there in the world living our lives. So the basic idea is that we're coming to know how our minds and how the whole thing, the whole mind-body complex, how that operates, and to have the awareness to catch ourselves when we're getting lost in storytelling. Let's say we're thinking about the future, we're rehearsing, we're reviewing the past, and we're not there in this moment when life is happening. So that happens in our lives, that happens when we're on the cushion trying to meditate. And so when we recognize that, we have the choice to bring our attention from the storytelling back into the present moment. And when we do the meditation practice, we are actually practicing that over and over again every time, because we'll sit there and the mind will go into the future, into the past, into commentary about what's happening, and we have the opportunity to catch that, bring it back, and re-engage attention in the next moment.
So, I mean, is the goal to completely avoid that inner dialogue?
Well, if that's your goal, good luck.
Right.
Because it's not going to happen. And I think that's one of the misconceptions about meditation, Buddhist style meditation, is that, somehow we're supposed to suppress or to stop the mind from producing thoughts. And if the mind is producing thoughts, somehow we're failing at meditation, or we're not doing it right. And that can become quickly a source of frustration, and people give up on the practice because they have this mistaken idea of what it should be like. That is built into us by evolution. It's not going to go away. And our job is not to suppress it or extinguish it, but is to learn how to extricate ourselves from it. So the thoughts are going to arise, the memories, the stories, and they're going to capture our attention. And then with awareness, we can say, that's where my mind has gone, and now I'm going to extricate myself from that and re-engage in whatever it is that I'm intending to do in this moment. And that is the practice, the retrieving of attention. So really, it would be very frustrating. And again, I think it comes from a lot of cultural images about meditation, that somehow we're clearing the mind or becoming very peaceful or very tranquil. And those things can certainly happen in meditation, but it's really not the goal. The goal is to become intimately familiar with your mind, with your experience.
Which I think is something that a lot of people sort of, they relate their mind to that voice that they're hearing in their head. I mean, is that a bad connection to make?
Well, it is part of your mind. It's certainly a major component of our minds or brains, if you will. So neuroscientists have identified what they call the default mode network in the brain. And you can see it on brain imaging when people are engaged, when we're engaged in our internal dialogue, we're self-referential thoughts. What am I going to do later? Or what happened in this conversation before? It lights up certain parts of the brain. And not surprisingly, when you're engaging in mindfulness, you're taking your attention out of those parts of the brain, they get quiet. So there are different aspects of the mind, and that default mode network has some utility, but I think that we tend to overuse it, or become, just involved with it too much. And that sometimes those self-referential stories become anxious or difficult or painful in some way, and that can lead to difficult emotions as a result. Mm-hmm. So we want to, there are many different components to mind. There's creativity, there's problem solving, there's all sorts of different things. And the idea with mindfulness practice is to be able to make choices about where our mind is, and to have it be a little more conforming, if you will, that it will try to stay with whatever it is that we're doing, knowing that it's going to go away, but then we have that ability to bring it back.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to get into your work in using metaphors as a way to practice mindfulness, but to sort of get back into somebody who this might be a new subject for, let's say, I mean, how can somebody who's listening to this for the first time, how do they decide whether or not they're in their day-to-day life being mindful?
Well, that's an interesting question. So I'd ask this person, are you present to the experiences that you're having as you're moving through your day? So let's say you wake up, you brush your teeth, you take a shower, you eat breakfast, you commute to work, you're at work, and so forth. So how much presentness is there in your day? Are you giving your full attention to brushing your teeth, the sensations of brushing your teeth, the physical sensations, the smell, the taste? Or are you lost in planning your day? Are you, in your mind, in your head, in your default mode network, planning your day or reviewing something, or just kind of random thoughts, seemingly, and especially when in the shower and when you're driving and when you're eating, you may be not paying attention to what you're eating. So if you are, then great. Then you may not even need to do mindfulness practice, meditation practice, because you're already present. But most people seem to be on what we call automatic pilot, that things that we do all the time become routines, and we don't need to give a lot of deliberate attention to them. So we can take a shower and we can just be completely lost in fantasy land during the whole time we take the shower. And we can drive to work the same way. So if we're on automatic pilot, we're not being mindful.
I know that I'm definitely guilty of that. I'll pick up a book and get to the bottom of a page and realize that I don't remember anything that's been on the page itself because I was thinking about something in the future or something in the past. Now it seems to me that we're all sort of, we can't all completely avoid thinking about the future or the past at every moment. Is there any benefit to thinking towards the future or bringing back things from the past?
Oh, absolutely. And again, the question is more about choice. So if I'm planning my vacation, I'm going to be thinking about the future. Okay. But that's my intention in the moment. That's my activity. Sometimes, the stuff that bubbles up from that default mode network is useful. And again, we're not trying to suppress it. It would not be useful or helpful to suppress it, to expect it to go away. But we want to shift the ratio of how much time we actually spend lost in thoughts versus how much time we actually spend engaged in our experiences. So if that automatic pilot takes over most of the time, any territory we can take back from that can be helpful.
Yeah, well, it's definitely weird to think about because once you're conscious of it, at least for me, I realize that I probably spend most of my time on autopilot.
Well, and most people do. And even those of us who meditate still find ourselves pulled back into that because I think it's again, built into us by evolution. It's part of the fabric of our being, and it's not about to go away. So we just learn to work with that and to just know whether that departure into storytelling is useful or not. And when it's not useful, then we can set it aside. And it's good to be able to ask that question, have that question in mind a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that actually is a very good yardstick for a lot of things, whether or not it's useful for us. So let's get into some of the benefits of being mindful. I'm actually kind of curious. I know that I've read that there's been success in treating various diseases with using mindfulness practice.
Well, there have been a lot of studies for a lot of different conditions. And the preliminary results of these studies, these are preliminary studies, some of them have been very encouraging, but a lot more study needs to be done before we can say mindfulness cures these diseases. But I think it can be a very helpful practice. One of the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy has been one of the better studied, had the most quality studies, and that has been shown to help people who have had depression to help them avert future episodes of depression. So there's a lot of research. There's been an explosion of research interest in treating mindfulness and in looking at the brain mechanisms involved with mindfulness, and all of that is very encouraging. And sometimes I think we get a little carried away in what's been shown in terms of effectiveness of these things, but I think that it's certainly moving in that direction. But there's still a lot more research to be done.
Do you think that we might be a little bit handicapped in the Western world in the way that I think that we're sort of traditionally told to thought about things like meditation and yoga just as I think the average view of it is probably just that it's just kind of a weird, I mean, I don't know. You know where I'm kind of going with this?
Well, you're in California, right?
Yeah.
So probably a lot more acceptable there. And I think that there really is a growing movement of acceptability. Certainly yoga has become...
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
And meditation. But interestingly, it's become popular because it's become more westernized in some sense, that yoga has become more like exercise. And mindfulness is... meditation has also been kind of integrated into a more Western view of things, which, on the one hand is expectable and is useful in getting people to practice, but I think that can be limited. That's more like the mindfulness with a small m, and there are much more deeper benefits, the traditional benefits of meditation that are available. Now, I don't know about the East-West split, if that really holds up. A couple of things. One is that the Buddha was in the East, and people were struggling with their minds at the time that he was around and teaching 2,500 years ago. And there was nothing about being in the Eastern frame of mind that avoided that. But I think people certainly were open to what he was teaching, and meditation was a big part of what he was teaching back then. But over the centuries, people would be often astonished to learn that in most traditional Buddhist communities in Asia, people people like the lay people who are adherents, the Buddhists, they don't meditate, and many of the monks don't even meditate in a lot of traditions. So the centrality of meditation really has been a resurgence, a Renaissance movement that started a lot of it started in Burma and Thailand, that there's been a recommitment to meditation. But for centuries and centuries, that was really done on a very much smaller scale than people realize. So it's interesting that here in the West, we're very interested in meditation. So I think that's a good thing, even if we sort of integrate it into more of our Western way of thinking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's get into what the individual might expect in terms of benefits from. Well, let me sort of restate that. Where do you think somebody should start in terms of if they have no meditation practice, no mindfulness practice? Where do you suggest somebody start? Right.
Well, you start right where you are. And I typically, and most mindfulness meditation teachers, start with folks with their breathing, because breathing is happening right now. It's not a prop. You can't forget to bring it with you like beads or a bell or whatever it is. You don't need to rely on anything else. It's right there. It brings you into your body. And again, we were talking about that difference between being in our thoughts, that default mode network, and being in our experience. So breathing is an embodied experience that's happening now. So we can actually feel the breath. You can feel the physical sensations of breathing as the air comes in to the body, touches the nose, moves through the body, and the whole body participates in breathing, and we can pay attention to those sensations. And the other advantage of breathing, paying attention to our breathing, is that every breath we take has an emotional signature to it, if you will, that it gives us a sense of what our emotional state is in that moment. And that can be very useful in terms of navigating our lives when we're not meditating. So we just start with the breath. It's a very simple practice in concept. So we pay attention, we move our attention to the physical sensations of our breath. And what typically happens in maybe a second or two or a few seconds, the mind will start to go somewhere else. It might start with the breath and say, oh, this is really interesting. I've heard about this mindfulness thing. And, I remember that Carol went to this class and she told me about it. And then we're lost in a story.
I'm always thinking about Carol.
Yeah. So at that moment, now this is the key part of the practice. You catch yourself and you bring your attention back. Now, if you're in a class, or if I was leading the meditation, I would give people reminders every few minutes or seconds to kind of prompt them to come back. But with practice, you can notice, okay, I've just been lost in a story. Now I'm going to come back to my breath, and there'll be new sensations there that you can pay attention to. Now, one of the traps that people fall into, and I think this is part of the Western mindset, is that we get frustrated. Oh God, I don't know, what was wrong with me? Why was I doing that? My mind is so weak, and so that's just more storytelling that occurs, and we can just step back from that and say, okay, well, there's more storytelling, and now go back to the breath. So the practice becomes this back and forth movement of attention. We engage our attention on breathing. It goes away. We come back. Just going back and coming back each time. And it doesn't matter whether you're going away a lot or going away a little. The key is just to come back every time. So you just do that for however many minutes you choose, 5, 10, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. You can build up to different levels of practice. And we're really engaged in the process of discovering what it means to be alive in this moment, not as a concept, not as a story, not in words, but in actual experiences. So we're training ourselves to be able to appreciate that. And so the practice really isn't very complicated, but there are a lot of things that can get in the way, our expectations and other things that we bring a lot of, again, expectations or baggage to anything that we do, and that can happen with meditation. So a lot of what I do is I'm trying to help people to unlearn or deconstruct those expectations so that they can just enjoy their experience, however that experience manifests itself in that moment.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I was going to ask, would you say that one of the main components here, because a theme that I'm seem to be picking up on is just being conscious of where your mind is at, which is something that sounds simple, but I know that I'm not, like you said, that autopilot state.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good description. Yeah. So it's not about achieving some state of peacefulness or relaxation or tranquility, although those are often reliable byproducts of doing this practice. But if you aim for that, or if your expectation is, I'm supposed to clear my mind, I'm supposed to get relaxed here, sometimes what we're paying attention to is just how difficult and painful a situation is. And we try to be open and conscious of that rather than going away and trying to just get as far away from it as possible. So it really is about opening up to our life, to the richness, the vividness of our lives, in our senses, in our emotions, even in our thoughts, as to get as clear about that as possible. So it's not about just trying to be all peacefulness and light. It's just to try to work with what is present. And to do that which would be another benefit of practice, along with being able to be choiceful, is something we call equanimity. So it's the ability to be there with our experiences without pushing them away or without trying to hold on to them or feeling like our well-being, it depends on how things turn out in every moment, so that we can sit with whatever's happening with a degree of non-reactivity. The mind just tends to react to things and generates a lot of strong emotions. And sometimes those emotions aren't very helpful, and they just make a situation worse. So let's say it's conflict with another person. But our ability to sit with the strong feelings without reacting and bringing that conscious awareness to it that you just mentioned can actually help to make situations better.
Well, that was going to kind of bring us to the next topic too, which was avoidance or avoiding things. So it sounds to me like a part of being mindful is not sort of getting rid of those inputs, those negative inputs, those bad emotions that are coming in, but allowing yourself to feel them, right?
Yes, exactly.
But not allowing that feeling to sort of take over your emotions.
Well, to just get engulfed in a story about how awful it is and, poor me and how am I going to deal with this? But just, sitting with whatever is happening in a way that, you just become curious about what's happening, even the stuff that's not pretty or not comfortable. Mm-hmm. And we're developing this great sense of interest in our experience so that we wouldn't need to push that away. We say, oh, okay, let me take a look at that and see what that's made up of. And in that moment, we've given ourselves a degree of freedom because now we don't have to react. We're not just like stimulus and response. Some situation is pushing our buttons, but we don't have to do the characteristic reaction. And we can, with awareness, say, okay, well, let me just look at that and, might notice the body having a reaction, like the emotions are rising, but we can, in a practical sense, maybe we won't say the words to the other person that get us into trouble or do the thing, go out and have that drink or whatever it is that is our pattern of coping, and it gives us new ways to cope and just sit and be with the experience. That's an option. Sometimes we don't have to do anything with it.
Yeah, I think anybody can see why it would be beneficial to experience the whole range of human emotions rather than just the positive ones, and allowing yourself to sort of shove the negative ones down there, which is something that I know that in my personal life I've struggled with, not dealing with those negative emotions, but it's something that I'm trying to work on and can definitely see the benefits in.
Yeah. It's the whole enchilada of our experience, and not trying to bias it in a certain way. Now, it does turn out that if you practice this a lot, you may actually have more positive experiences. But, it's whatever. I mean, and it's just very unique to the individual, what's going on in your life. So there's a lot going on, then your meditation is going to get involved in those themes. And again, we're just trying to be able to work with them and not avoid them, and become curious about them. Be able to see that they're part of us, and maybe in doing that we can see other solutions to problems that have beset us.
Yeah, I think one overriding theme is that people probably need to get more interested in themselves and what's going on the inside, rather than all of these things that are being sent in from the outside as in the form of entertainment, I guess you might say.
Well, there's a lot of energy coming in from the outside in entertainment and social media. And as you know, I've written about introversion too. And I think for those of us who are introverts, that energy input can be pretty overwhelming at times. But yeah, the idea is is at least to have some working familiarity with our own experience. And the social media can just become a great way just another way of avoiding all of that.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a double-edged sword, because we definitely see the benefits of technology, but I think we're also starting to learn with as time goes by that we've had this technology, that there's definitely some negative side effects with it as well. And especially in the Western world, where I don't think I sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I don't think that maybe in the Western world, though you said yoga is definitely becoming more popular, meditation and mindfulness, huge movements in the United States now. But I think generally, and especially in the past, there's been more Eastern-minded things like that, I think, have sort of just been written off. Am I wrong in thinking that?
In the mainstream, yes. But I think all of those pieces, even though they didn't have mainstream acceptance, have been part of building this mindfulness movement. So what the Beats were doing in the 50s, and what was going on with the counterculture in the 60s, those were the seeds that were planted that are taking root now.
Okay, well, I did want to get into the book on I wanted to get into your book, but also the whole idea of being an introvert versus an extrovert. But just real quick, just for anybody that's listening that may not have ever had any kind of meditation practice, I know we talked a little bit about practice for mindfulness, but what do you suggest for somebody that has never meditated in their life before? Should they go on iTunes or wherever and get some binaural beats? Do you suggest listening to something 10 minutes a day to start off with, 20 minutes a day? Do you just have maybe a little brief idea for somebody that wants to start a meditation practice?
Yeah, well, there are lots of ways to start. You might find a local mindfulness meditation group in your community. That can be a way to start. Oftentimes those are maybe offered at very low charge or free. People can also there's lots of content to purchase, but you can also go to my website at arniekozak.com and I have which used to be a series of 8 physical CDs that are now available as MP3s that you can listen to right there. And you can start with the first CD with the instructions for breathing meditation, and then there's a period of 20 minutes where it's mostly silent, but I come in with those reminders, and that can help you to just get started. But really, I'd like to emphasize that you don't really need any props. I mean, you just need to, if you're breathing, you can do the practice. So you can just sit down. Folks can also I have a little meditation primer that I wrote up that they can get also by visiting my website, and I can send them a copy of that. And that can help them to get going.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the idea of the introvert for a little bit here. Now, would you say that everybody falls into either of the categories, introvert or extrovert?
Well, that wouldn't exactly, it wouldn't be my preferred way of describing it, and I don't really think it fits the reality of the situation. So introversion and extroversion is a continuum. So most of us would find ourselves having our center of gravity somewhere on that continuum. And then there are, but other than at the extremes of that continuum, most of us have a mixture of introverted and extroverted traits. And context makes a difference as well. So we may be extroverted in one situation, but more introverted in another. But knowing where your preferred center of gravity is can be helpful. And so, yes, I think most of us would say, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. A lot of people do have a pretty good balance of both sets of traits. We would call them ambiverts. But, but I think that in the literature, and I've probably been guilty of this myself, that we talk about as if there's something called an introvert and there's something called an extrovert, and it's not quite that structured. It's more fluid, and it's a more fluid process for most of us.
Okay. Well, I think everybody kind of has a basic idea of that, but your focus has kind of been on I guess you might say what the benefits of being an extrovert, or how you might take advantage of those personality traits.
Well, the advantages of being an introvert, actually.
Introvert, my bad.
Well, I mean, I think all of these traits have value. Mm-hmm. And I think my work is now, I've written books about how introverts can take better care of themselves with mindfulness and other things. But really, I see this as a wider problem, that we've become a very extroverted culture, that we place a lot of value on the kind of hyper extreme types of extroverted qualities, and we haven't put as much emphasis on the more introverted qualities, which would be more contemplative, more appreciation for silence, more appreciation for solitude. Again, social media really becomes an obstacle in that way. So I think that the part of the message, and this is also very central to the message of mindfulness and the Buddhist teachings, is really there's tremendous value for everyone, regardless of whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, being more introverted. So just sitting in meditation is an introverted activity because it's solitary. Even if you're in a group, you're practicing alone, maybe together with other people, but having an appreciation and interest for your interior process. So that's also very much an introverted quality. I think the culture of the world would be better off if we had a bit more of a balance there with that.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. Well, so another thing that I wanted to get into was how you use metaphors to teach mindfulness, which I think is a really incredible thing. So let's kind of get into that. You have your book, Wild Chickens and Petty Tyrants.
Yeah. So I certainly knew when I wrote that book that the Buddha used a lot of metaphors himself, because a lot of the metaphors in the book are from him, and then there are updated ones with our current technology and other things. But the Buddha really was the master of the metaphor, and there are over 1,000 different metaphors that he used in all of his teaching. And really, we can't talk about the mind or the self without reverting to metaphors. And much of our language is comprised of metaphors too, and our concepts about ourselves are also metaphorical. So it's an interesting field, and one that I've been interested in for a long time. But yeah, I like to coin new metaphors for meditation practice and mindfulness, and there's a long tradition going back to the Buddha with that.
No, absolutely, and a lot of them, at least for me, it was very surprising how much they do really. They help you to learn. Can we maybe go over what a couple of them, maybe what somebody might expect to see or learn in the book? Yeah,
well, some of my favorite ones and ones that I coined, the DVD commentary one. Maybe this one is already getting a little antiquated. Since we don't watch many DVDs.
You can just change DVD to Netflix, the Netflix commentary.
I don't know if Netflix, but if you remember when the DVD, you can switch your DVD movie into the director's commentary mode, and the director and some of the actors, producer, whatever, they're talking over the movie.
Uh-huh.
Movie gets muted a little bit, and they're talking over the movie. And that's a perfect description of the way that our minds work. I mean, here's our life.
I've never even thought about that, but it really is.
We are talking over it. It's like we've got a color commentator in our head, and now I'm going out into this situation for this over here. Why did you say that? So that is like, well, and I can't stand. I never really. I mean, I was interested to hear what they said, the director said, but I couldn't really watch that mode. It was just too frustrating for me. So when we're really trying to get out of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I could never watch that mode either. It's because I either want to be completely enthralled by the story, or I want to hear what the director's saying and have visuals of what he's saying. But one that I definitely wanted to get, and one that I think is pretty powerful, especially in terms of like the things that we've been talking about today in terms of meditation and mindfulness, is the metaphor that's actually used as the title of the book. Wild Chickens and Petty Tyrants.
Wild Chickens. So that came from a story of one of my meditation teachers, Larry Rosenberg, who's also written some wonderful books on mindfulness as well. And it's this, he went to Asia to further his studies, and when he got there, expecting things to be peaceful and quiet in the forest, there were all these wild chickens that were just screeching all the time. And I think that's a great metaphor for all of the difficult, annoying, or unexpected or unwanted experiences that we have in our lives. And it confronts us with a choice. We can just generate a lot of stories about that, how this is terrible and it's ruining our experience, or we can revise our expectation. That this reveals what I call our secondary agendas. We have a primary agenda. Oh, I'm going to go meditate in the forest, and then we have all of our secondary agendas, all the expectations and the desire for it to be a certain way. And most of the, I don't know, seems like a lot of the time life doesn't really cooperate with our expectations. So the wild chickens are an invitation to, again, be curious. Okay, so now if I'm meditating with wild chickens or a jackhammer outside my, or, kids or dogs or whatever is going on, or an ache or a pain, that I don't have to, I'm not excluding these things from my experience and trying to push them out. I'm including them. I can include that and still meditate, still do the practice, still live my life, still be okay at a very fundamental level as a human being, even when things aren't going exactly as I had hoped, which again seems most of the time.
Yeah, I loved that metaphor when I first heard it and heard your explanation for it. So in that sense, do you think that expectation is something that we should drop completely?
Well, again, to look at those expectations and to see, do they serve us? Do they have utility? Are they, if it's something that represents a core value of ours, then maybe not, we're not just jettisoning all expectations, but again, you might look at them and say, how necessary is this? Is it that important? Is it that necessary? And I find that a lot of them can be, we can toss them away because they're really not all that useful or helpful. So again, you've got to look at them.
Put them up against that usefulness yardstick, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Call that, can I change my rules into preferences? And can I live with a situation that's not ideal? And again, we're looking to be more flexible with that.
Awesome stuff. Well, let's get into your books a little bit and what people can maybe find at your website, exquisitemind.com. I know that you've got several things coming out this year, 2016, correct?
Actually, it was 2015 that everything came out. So last year was a big year for publishing. I had the book we just talked about, Wild Chickens, that came out in 2009. And just recently I have a follow-up book to that, Mindfulness A-Z, 108 Insights for Awakening Now, that came out from Wisdom Publications as well. And that book also, Chicken's book and the Mindfulness A-Z, has 108 brief chapters. And in Mindfulness A-Z, instead of metaphors, although there are a few new metaphors, I'm telling stories. So it's an alphabetized list of mindfulness and Buddhist concepts. And in a lot of these entries, I share personal stories about my own struggles with mindfulness. And some of them are successes and others are not successes, because I think it's important to not get idealistic about this or holier than thou. And so people can see that, there are lots of times, even though I practice, I do stupid things, and how to use that humility to grow our practice. So that one had just come out in the fall. This summer I had the Everything Essentials Buddhism Book, which is an abridgment of a previous book that I wrote on Buddhism, and so that's out. That's just a nice quick read on some of the basics of Buddhism and the Buddha's teachings. And then in the spring, I had the Awakened Introvert come out. And this is a workbook from New Harbinger that has a lot of practical exercises. So it goes into what it means to be an introvert, how to take care of your energy, how to build solitude in your life, and how to use mindfulness and Buddhist principles to help you to be more of a flourishing introvert. And again, I think that the book was written to introverts, but I think really anybody can benefit from engaging in a more introverted way of being, or at least being able to have access to that part of ourselves and to be there at times, even if you're an extrovert and just like to be, that's great. But this to have that quiet center and that quiet place within ourselves can be really useful.
Oh, absolutely. So everything that you just talked about is available in print, right?
Yes, all those books are available wherever books are sold.
Yeah.
The Awakened Introvert did come out as an audiobook as well recently, so that's another format that's available. And all this information is available on my website.
Awesome. And of course, wherever anybody is listening to this, whether it be iTunes or YouTube, the links to everything that Dr. Kozak is talking about will be available in the show description. Is there anything that you kind of wanted to leave us with before we get off here? Maybe some advice for somebody that was introduced to mindfulness today?
Well, just keep practicing and don't let your expectations or the obstacles get in the way. And again, I have, that's what I like to help people with, is to kind of humanize the practice and to not let it get co-opted by some of our, more competitive or achievement-oriented habits.
Uh-huh.
And also, people, in addition to the books, if you want to come and meditate with me, I'm going to be teaching at the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health, which is in the Berkshire Mountains of Massachusetts on the East Coast. And I do a 5-day workshop there every I guess it's late winter, early spring. And that information is on my website too. So that can be a nice way to be in a beautiful place with great food and to also get some introduction to meditation. And that workshop follows along the Mindfulness A-Z pattern. And we get into a lot of different themes that can be useful for your life. So it really just, it's not about making yourself into anything special, but just really appreciating what is here in our life in this moment. And there's really no way to do it wrong. That's what I would tell people.
Incredible parting words. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Kozak, and hopefully we'll get you back on here again.
All right. Thanks, Trevor. My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed listening. Dr. Kozak is definitely a brilliant man. You can check out all the things that we talked about and more on his websites, exquisitemind.com and arniekozak.com. That's ARNIEKOZAK.com, as well as any other links that we talked about in the podcast that will be available in the show description. I want to thank everybody for listening. This has definitely been one of my favorite interviews thus far. So make sure you guys keep your eyes peeled to vibinhigher.com, and until then, we'll catch you next time on the Vibin Higher Podcast.